later in his life, he got tuberculosis. And instead of, in those days, the cure for it was to go away to a sanatorium, some place where they kept you quiet and you were isolated from other people so you didn't spread the disease.
The doctors tried to send him to the mountains because everybody went to the mountains when they got tuberculosis.
Right.
And he said to the doctor, why would I want to go to the mountains? I got everything right here.
But he talked his way into staying home. And in that very room where we had worship was where his hospital bed was set up. And he spent, I don't know how many weeks or months there.
But he found a doctor that would let him keep smoking in spite of his tuberculosis. He had the theory that psychologically it was better for his recuperation to be able to keep smoking.
Lester assumed the presidency of the family company twice, both times following the untimely death of a brother. In 1964, he became the first chairman of the board of the Osblond Tree Expert Company.
He was the last of his siblings in the company to live. His brother Griffith died when he was 52. Grandpa was younger than that. He was probably about 48 at the time. And then Uncle Carl, who was a couple years younger than Dad, died at age 63, 1967, I think it was.
When Mr. Carl Asplund died, Mr. Lester Asplund had to take over as president. He took over as president for only a short while.
Right.
And then Barr took it over.
Right.
But the company held up good. I mean, it was some trying times back then.
So what happened at that point, Grandpa Lester was working in the company, and 7 of the second generation, my Uncle Bob, Uncle Boyd, Uncle Barr, Uncle Chris, and so on. And he kind of pulled that next generation together to carry the company forward. And they called him Snow White because his hair was white, and the 7 dwarfs.
He would show up, and he'd always start out by saying, well, I had to go visit the 7 dwarfs again today to keep them straight. And that was Lester. It was a joke, and he was serious.
Right.
It was both things at the same time.
As the company grew, so did his family, adding 2 more sons and a daughter. Grace remained home to raise the children as Lester and his brothers, eventually adding Oswald to the supervision of the company, continued to grow the business. His weekends used to be booked up with football games. Now he spent them working with his children. In the early years, he built play cars for the driveway. In the middle years, he organized weekend work details. And as the kids got older, he taught the boys sailing and even organized tournaments.
The first thing we built was probably the Putney. That's the little gasoline-powered car. I was helping.
Yeah.
But he had a man from the shop, the tree company shop, who was a mechanic, who came in, and the 2 of them were actually cutting the metal and all that kind of stuff to make it work.
We went to the shore every summer from the time I was a kid, 6 or 7 years old, on through forever. And I can't remember much about how much Grandpa Osplund was there at first, probably only on the weekends. But because of us being there, he felt it was important for us to have things to do. So he organized a sailing fleet of sailboats. We had a place on the lagoon down there, a boathouse with boat slips where we kept our boats. And every weekend, we'd, during the season of July and August, would sail boat races. And he'd come out in the old Leslie boat, the Chris Craft with the mahogany hull, and he would follow us around and make sure everybody got in. And there was a lot of work and responsibility. And then at the end of the season, he'd arrange for some sort of a banquet somewhere, and he'd probably buy the prizes, the trays and the bowls that are still around various members of the family.
When I was probably 15, 16, and 17, I went to Ocean City with Myra and Boyd to be the mother's helper. And so we had a house just up the beach from where Aunt Grace and Uncle Lep were, 2701 Wesley. And Aunt Grace had a wooden turtle about this big. I think maybe she bought it in Puerto Rico. Beautifully carved turtle, but the lid came off, and inside she had gumdrops. And when the grandchildren came, everybody headed for turtle soup, was what she called it.
Well, she loved her grandchildren, and she had some ways of expressing that. She had the little turtle. You take it was a wooden carved turtle.
Do you still have that?
I have something that was made like that.
Turtle
because
soup?
It was the turtle soup.